Unfortunately, in Valorant, you can't play every agent on every map. You can pick them, but it's not always gonna work out well. Don't believe me? Try to pick any other controller other than Viper on Breeze, and you'll get flamed for it. It's just how the game works. Now, over here at SkillCapped, we do believe people are a little less open-minded than they should be when it comes to agent picks, but that doesn't mean there aren't some objectively better agents to pick than others when it comes to maps. That's why after the recent changes, we're going to be giving you the 3 must-pick agents on every map, so you can properly fill out any team comp you'll come across in Valorant. This is all necessary to increase your win rate. Some people make climbing way harder on themselves than it needs to be. For example, some people try to climb without even attempting to check out SkillCapped. Maybe it's an ego thing. Maybe they don't want to listen to the advice of some of the best coaches in the game. Your guess is as good as mine. But if you ask me, trading a few dollars to become an infinitely better player sounds like a pretty great deal. Not to mention, we're the only service that literally guarantees you'll rank up, or you don't pay. We do this because we are hands down the best place to improve at Valorant, and we're willing to back that up. We're gonna get into our list, but if you're really looking to improve, be sure to check out SkillCapped, and we'll see you there. To start the list off, let's talk about Ascent. Right off the bat, the most dominant pick on this map has to be Kayo. In pro play, he's currently holding over an 85% pick rate across all regions, which is super impressive to say the least. His kit provides a ton of tools that are just fantastic for taking space. Although the recent flash changes made Kayo's right click slightly worse, they also made his support power that much stronger. With all the open Skye on this map, Kayo's left click flash is gonna see a ton of value, and that's not where it stops. His molly also is an extremely useful tool for site executes for blocking off choke points like Tree, A Heaven, CT on B, and Market. His ult is also insane for those same executes, since unlike maps like Pearl and Breeze, the sites don't really have long sight lines. If you pop his ult, you can be very sure you'll be hitting anyone and everyone that's playing anywhere near the site. Overall, just a great pick for Ascent, and arguably the best pick depending on who you're asking. Now, the second agent I want to talk about for the map Ascent is Omen, who's easily the best controller on the map. For starters, there are so many strong one-way smokes that are very difficult to deal with when trying to attack. His blind is also very useful for taking space on both defense and on the offense just because how the map is set up. Omen's paranoia covers all of B main and most of A main, which combos really well with a Jett that dashes in to capitalize on blinded enemies. His range is also just far enough that he's able to smoke pretty much the entire map, which isn't something you can really say about every map nowadays. Overall, Omen is a great pick for Ascent and is an agent I would consider to be one of the best on the map. Now, the last agent I want to talk about for Ascent is Fade, who's really just a strong agent in general, but is specifically strong on Ascent. In pro play, she currently has almost a 65% pick rate on the map. She has some very strong spots for her haunt, like on top of the switch or on top of the wall on A side. And her ult is also so big it completely covers both sites entirely. Her Seize is also a great ability for clearing common angles like Boathouse, Gen, Hell, or Wine. Fade is a fantastic agent to pick up on Ascent and earns herself a spot on this list. Now that we're all done talking about Ascent, let's move on to the next map, Bind. Right away when thinking about this map, the agent that instantly comes to mind is of course Raze. Holding an absolutely absurd 94% pick rate in pro play, you can't talk about the best agents on Bind without mentioning her. She is by far the best duelist at opening up the sights on Bind in the entire game, and her powerful utility seems to almost have been made for this map. Her boombot's really good at clearing spaces like hookah, and the many tight areas of the map make her nade extremely deadly. A player that's competent with her satchels can even make some powerful plays like getting over the truck on A site to enter through the back of U-Haul and catch enemies off guard. I don't think I need to say much more about Raze on Bind. Most players know by now that she's a strong pick, so let's keep chugging along. The second agent I want to talk about on Bind is Brimstone. Even when Brimstone was considered a weaker agent, he was still a solid pick on this map. Nowadays, he's a much stronger agent, and because of that, he's even a staple on Bind. This is mainly due to his ultimate that provides a ton of value throughout the map. When it's online, areas like hookah, inside of tube on B side, and U-Haul all become really risky areas to try and play in. Brim's molly is also very solid for clearing common corners. The smaller range on his smokes also doesn't really hinder him that much, since the map is relatively small. He's a really good pick on the map, and a go-to controller as well. And last but not least, let's talk about Skye. Skye's a very good pick on Bind, and is only getting better after her recent changes. Her flashes are extremely valuable, with many powerful areas that make it hard to hide from them. If you get blinded by a Skye while in B-Long, you're as good as dead. Her Trailblazer's also a great tool for clearing angles on Bind, especially since there aren't too many long angles on this map, where it can get destroyed before it's able to see enemies. Skye also combos pretty well with an agent like Brim, where you can pop a flash out of one of his smokes to catch enemies off guard and nab yourself free kills. Skye's usually a solid pick, but she is especially solid on Bind. Now that we're done talking about Bind, let's move on to Haven. Chamber is the first agent I'm going to talk about, and honestly is an agent that should get an honorable mention on pretty much every map. Now, that being said, he's especially deadly on this map, and that's because there are a ton of great op angles that he can play from, like C-Long, A-Long, and even from B-side. His trip also gets a ton of value on this map, since the defense is usually spread thin thanks to having 3 sites. Being able to place down a trip and then cheat a player more towards one side of the map can be very strong. Other than that, there isn't much else to say. He's a great agent whose tools are very strong on Haven. Moving on, the next best agent on Haven is Breach. Breach currently holds over a 77% win rate in pro play across all regions, and it's easy to see why. There are a few narrow areas around the map you can take advantage of with his fault line. Think of areas like C-Long or A-Long where the ability is pretty much impossible to dodge. He's also a very powerful agent for site executions, where you can use his flashes off the boxes on the sites to make a nightmare for enemies to hold. Now combine that with his very powerful ultimate and you have an agent that just takes over games on this map. Finally, before moving on, we can't forget to talk about Omen. Omen's a solid agent in general, but he has some tools that make him especially strong on Haven. For starters, he can take advantage of all the boxes scattered throughout the map to play in some pretty nasty off angles to catch enemies off guard. He can also combine these positions with powerful one-way smokes that he can stick into walls pretty much wherever he wants. And finally, similar to Breach, he can also take advantage of long hallways around the map with his paranoia to blind enemies and get a few free kills. When it comes to Haven, Omen is one of the best picks on the map, and even makes our top 3 for this list. We're about halfway through the list, and the next map I'm going to talk about is Icebox. And when it comes to Icebox, no agent comes to mind faster than Viper, coming in with an unbelievable 99% pick rate in pro play. Ladies and gentlemen, you cannot make this up. On Icebox, there's really no agent in the game that can do her job. On attack, her wall is pretty much necessary for site executions to block off the wide sight lines, and she also has very powerful lineups that are great for securing rounds in the post plant once your team's able to get the bomb down. On defense, she has the ability to stall for an extremely long time thanks to her mollies and her smokes. When you're looking for a controller, you pretty much have to pick Viper if you don't want to be put at a disadvantage, and because of that, she earns a spot for one of the best 3 agents on the map. The next agent in top 3 for Icebox is Chamber, and I know we just talked about him on Haven, but he's also pretty much a must pick on Icebox as well. His trip is one of the only ones in the game that can effectively hold the flank on attack and on defense. It's one of the best tools for watching the push through tube. There's also a ton of great opping angles that he can take advantage of, like on top of yellow or pretty much anywhere on A side. And speaking of A side, thanks to his TPs, he can play in a ton of very aggressive positions, get a pick, and then retreat to safety, playing almost like a duelist in that sense. Icebox is just one of those maps where you can't really afford to not have a Chamber on your team, which is why we gave him a spot on this list. Speaking of must-pick agents, Sova is our 3rd pick for best agents on Icebox. He has by far the best tools for clearing the angles you'll find on Icebox, especially with all the verticality. Skye's Trailblazer just can't do the job. And with so many corners to clear, you can't really afford to push into a site without info gathering tools to clear the way for you. Sova also just combos really well with Viper to instantly kill enemies with shock darts that have become vulnerable by one of her mollies. Long story short, Sova is an extremely powerful agent on Icebox and is easily a top 3 pick for the map. Moving on, let's talk about Breeze. Breeze is a map that's filled with tons of long sight lines and little cover, and agents that can take advantage of that are able to excel on this map. And the first agent I want to talk about is Jett. Now, Jett has some fantastic tools that make her a great pick on Breeze. She is very good at using the op, which lets her take advantage of long sight lines, and she can also take advantage of all the verticality on the map to play in powerful off angles. She can play on top of the pyramids on A side or anywhere around the perimeter of B side site, just to name a few examples. Besides Jett, agents like Viper and Sova are also fantastic picks for Breeze. In pro play, they're holding over 99% and 95% pick rates respectively, and there's a really good reason for that. Similar to Icebox, Viper's wall is pretty much the only smoke that can realistically provide the cover you need for a site execute. Her mollies are also great for stalling pushes on defense, and on attack, there's some great lineups that can help you ensure that the bomb goes off. Honestly, this map feels like it was made for Viper. Sova's utility is also really important for site executes. Due to a lack of cover, it's very difficult to hide from a well-placed recon bolt. His drone's also a fantastic scouting tool that can't really be replaced, since this is a map where the limited vision of Skye's Trailblazer really hurts her. When considering all of these points, it was an easy decision to rank him within the top 3 agents on Breeze. Alright, don't worry, we are almost there, only a couple of maps left, and the next one is Fracture. With the recent changes to the map, many of you might think the meta would be shaken up quite a bit, but luckily for us, that's not the case. Now, Fracture's one of the more unique maps with a gimmick, where the attackers attack from both sides and defenders start in the middle of the map. The map is also littered with tons of narrow lanes and tight spaces, so agents that can take advantage of these qualities really excel. The big name that comes to mind here is Breach. He's an initiator that's uniquely suited to take advantage of the map's design. His fall line is extremely deadly in the narrow lanes the map is known for, and the sites are so small, his ultimate is all but guaranteed to hit. There are also a ton of boxes that Breach can take advantage of for his flashes and aftershock, just adding to his versatility here. Breach is probably the best pick on Fracture, and I doubt many people would fight me on that. Next up, let's talk about Raze, an agent that can also take advantage of all the tight spaces on the map. Just her existence on the enemy team is enough to force you to play differently. It's really hard to plant in safe positions, since all the safest positions to plant in force you to get stuck in a corner, where then you're susceptible to her paint shells. She also combos very well with Breach, since her satchels give her the ability to close distance very quickly on enemies that he stunned. These two agents form an incredibly deadly duo that can't be beat on a map like Fracture. The last agent we need to talk about is, of course, Chamber. Chamber is easily the most effective sentinel on this map, and this is a map where you really need one. The fact that attackers can push you from both sides of the map makes it really easy to get pinched if you decide to play on site. Chamber is one of the only sentinels whose trips can actually hold choke points properly, especially at arcade, where pre-round barriers make it very awkward to place down trips. Chamber's more aggressive playstyle also helps him out a lot, since Fracture is a map where sitting back on defense just really doesn't work very well. Chamber just has some of the best tools out of any sentinel for Fracture, which is why he makes our top 3 for the map. Now, last but not least, who could forget about Pearl? As the newest map in the game, the meta for Pearl is constantly evolving, and that being said, there are a few agents that have definitely shown they're a step above the rest. The first of these agents is Fade, who currently has an 85% pick rate in pro play. Her abilities are very strong on Pearl. Her ultimate is especially powerful on A site, where you can't really get away from it. There are also a ton of spots where you can throw her haunt that both see the entire sites, and they're hard to shoot. The next agent on this list is yet again Chamber. I think I'm starting to see a pattern here. Nevertheless, there are some great reasons for why Chamber is one of the best picks here. His trips are easily the best out of Sentinels, since Killjoy is limited by range, and there aren't a ton of great spots to place Cypher trips, especially around B side. Chamber's trademark can be placed pretty much anywhere, and it'll do its job effectively. B-side's also probably the best opping angle in the game, which plays to Chamber's strengths, but we already know that Chamber is a strong agent. So let's move on to the very last agent on this list, and that's actually Astra. Since her nerfs a while back, Astra hasn't really been able to see that much play, but Pearl's a map where she seems to be finding a home. It can take a while to rotate on these maps sometimes, and Astra being able to provide support from anywhere on the map is very useful. Traditional smokes are also the go-to smokes for this map, even on B side, where it's so open, since you can use them to smoke off B tunnel and B tower. And finally, her ultimate is also extremely useful on Pearl as well, especially again on B side, since you can wall off all the choke points pretty easily. Also on the defense here, Cosmic Divide is also insanely valuable when trying to defuse the bomb on B side. It's because a lot of the time, teams will plant the bomb and then back all the way up and defend it on B ramp. Astra can just place a Cosmic Divide down close to her, and then just start sticking the defuse if the enemies are trying to play like that. Overall, Astra's a fantastic pick on Pearl, and even snuck into our top 3 agents for the map. And with that, we're done here. We've gone through a lot, but we can't talk about everything, so if there are any agents that you think we should have talked about that we missed, feel free to let us know in the comments. And if you made it this far into the video, please consider hitting that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. All of us here at SkillCapped want to give you a huge thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.